All right, are you ready for this? Your notes on Think Like a Monk. Wow. We are diving deep today. You've got underlines, you've got highlights. Heck, is that a coffee stain?
Yeah.
It seems like this book really got to you.
It's funny, when you think about monk wisdom, you might picture chanting and robes and all that. But honestly, it's some of the most practical stuff out there.
I know, right? It's not about like escaping reality or anything. It's about mastering your own mind so you can handle everything this crazy world throws at you. Like whether you're trying to get that promotion or, deepen your relationships, or even if you just want a little more peace in your life. And speaking of peace, your notes on letting go, those really jumped out at me, especially that part about clearing the impure mirror of the mind. Such a powerful image.
It is a powerful image, isn't it? It's like our minds are these mirrors reflecting back our values, desires, all of that. But here's the thing. How often is that reflection distorted,
Yeah.
clouded by all the external pressures?
It's true. It's like we're bombarded with messages constantly about like what we should want, how we should look, even who we should be. It's exhausting.
It is, and it's like Shetty says, all that noise, it's like dust on the mirror. Makes it so hard to see our true selves.
And that is a perfect segue to what you highlighted about values being formed unconsciously. It's like sometimes we're just on autopilot, just chasing after things we've been conditioned to want. We don't even stop to ask ourselves why we want them.
It's so true.
Like you flag that example about the media, especially social media, shaping our ideas of beauty without us even realizing it. Kind of scary when you think about it.
It is a little alarming, isn't it? How we just internalize these messages, and suddenly there are truths, our values. But the real key here is this. True fulfillment comes when your actions match the values that you hold deep down, not the ones that someone else put there.
And that's exactly why that where did your values come from?
Exercise is so brilliant, you totally circled that one. It's like you're holding up a magnifying glass to your own subconscious.
It really is. It's all about getting curious about what you believe and asking yourself, where did this value come from? Like, is it really mine or did I pick it up somewhere along the way?
It's amazing what you discover about yourself, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Sometimes a little uncomfortable, but hey, that's where the growth happens,
Yeah.
right? Which reminds me of something else you highlighted, and it kind of gives me the chills, honestly. Fear.
Yeah. It seems like Shetty's personal story, the one about facing his own fear, that fear of disappointing his parents, it seems like that really hit home for you.
It is such a universal fear, though, isn't it? That fear that we won't live up to what's expected of us, whether it's real or just in our heads.
It's true, it is. But the interesting thing is how Shetty approaches fear. He doesn't see it as this enemy to be defeated.
Right.
He actually wants us to, like, lean into it a little bit.
To explore it.
Yes. To see it as a signal, he uses that analogy of the trees, how they need wind to grow strong roots.
Because if everything's always calm and predictable, how are we ever going to develop the resilience we need for when the storms hit?
Exactly. So it's about reframing fear, not just trying to run from it.
It's an opportunity for growth, you see.
Speaking of reframing, your notes on walking into your fear, those are practically yelling at me right now.
Oh, yes.
That story about the attorney, remember? The one who wanted to change careers but was terrified to do it.
Oh, it's classic, isn't it?
Yeah.
Mistaking a branch fear for the root fear.
Right. They were so afraid of starting over, but when you really get to the heart of it, the root of that fear was about their self-worth. They were afraid of being seen as a failure if they walked away from their fancy job.
It's amazing, though, isn't it? Once you uncover that root fear, it's like you found this master key. You can unlock a whole new level of courage and clarity.
It's so true. Okay, you ready to shift gears a little?
Sure.
You've got a whole section here on purpose, and from your notes, it seems like Shetty's quadrant of potential really sparked something in you. It's like we hear all the time, find your passion. But how exactly do you do that, right? It always seems so vague. But Shetty's quadrant of potential, that's different. You even highlighted each quadrant, what you like, what you love, what you're good at, what the world needs. I mean, it's like he's drawn a map to finding work that truly lights you up, but also makes a difference.
Exactly. Because it's not just about one or the other. We need that balance for true fulfillment. And speaking of balance, this is where you highlighted Shetty's story, the part about how he felt pressured to go into finance.
Oh, right. Even though
He was good at it. And it definitely checked that needed box.
yeah. But his heart wasn't in it. It's like that classic struggle. Should I listen to my head or my heart?
It takes guts to walk away from a path that's laid out for you, especially one like that.
He could easily just climb that ladder, right? Made a ton of money. But he chose to listen to that little voice inside, the one that said, go teach.
And think about the ripple effect. Imagine if he'd ignored that pull towards teaching. I
Mhm.
mean, this isn't just about finding a job you love. It's bigger than that. It's about aligning your work with your values, with your talents, and honestly, what you feel called to contribute to the world.
You know, you should try something. Remember those blank pages you have at the back of your book where you jot down your ideas? What if you actually sketched out your own quadrant of potential? I'm serious. I know it might seem a little weird, but sometimes seeing it right there in front of you with your own words, it just clicks, you know?
Getting those thoughts out of your head and onto paper, it's powerful stuff.
It really is. Speaking of connection, your notes on relationships, those were interesting. You spent a lot of time with the 6 loving exchanges.
Ah, yes.
It's so easy to get caught up in, the romantic stuff, the grand gestures, the fancy dinners. But then Shetty throws in those curveballs,
Less obvious expressions of
Yeah.
love.
like exchanging knowledge, acts of service, just spending quality time. It's not what we typically think of when we think of love. You even circled those, like you were saying, hold on, there's more to this.
And that's what I appreciate about his perspective. He's challenging us to see love in those everyday moments, those acts of support, of understanding, even just sharing what you know with someone.
Yeah.
I mean, haven't you ever felt loved when someone took the time to teach you something new?
Oh, absolutely. And that analogy with the redwood trees, wow, that stuck with me.
It's such a powerful image, isn't it?
Those massive trees, they actually have really shallow roots, which surprised me.
Yeah.
So what keeps them upright during storms?
They intertwine their roots with other redwoods. They create this huge support system.
It's like this giant underground hug, and it makes you realize we're the same way, We need each other. You even highlighted that line about how we often miss the love that's right in front of us. We're so busy looking for it somewhere else.
So true. Searching for the perfect partner, the perfect friend. But we forget about the amazing people we already have in our lives.
Exactly. And that's where I think this monk wisdom really shines. It's not about finding perfect people, it's about learning how to give and receive love honestly and authentically, imperfections and all.
Because let's face it, those imperfections, those rough edges, that's where the real beauty of connection lies.
It's like those redwood trees. Even the strongest among us, we need support sometimes. And speaking of support, your notes on negativity, those really caught my eye. It seems like Shetty's take on that really resonated with you. You highlighted that part about negativity being contagious. And you know what? It really is. Like, we've all met that person, the one that just walk into a room and boom, all the energy gets sucked right out.
It's like a black hole of good vibes.
Exactly. But Shetty takes it even further. He calls negativity a social virus.
And he's not wrong. Think about how our brains work, how we're wired for connection. We pick up on other people's emotions. It's automatic. So if you're constantly around negativity, it's going to get in your system. You can't help it.
It's like that experiment he talks about, the one with the monks who weren't allowed to complain or compare or criticize anything negative, off limits.
Oh, we.
I know, right? Could you imagine? I'd be a complete failure. But it really makes you think, though, about how often we spread that negativity, even when we don't mean to.
It's a good reminder to be mindful of what we say, what we do, even what we think. Not that we have to be positive all the time. That's not realistic.
Yeah.
But we can at least be aware of when that negativity starts to creep in.
And that's where that little tool you underline comes in, several times, actually. That spot, stop, swap thing. So simple, but so smart.
Oh, it's like hitting the reset button on your brain.
Yeah.
You see that negative thought popping up, you stop yourself and you swap it out for something better, something positive.
Instead of going down that rabbit hole of negativity, you're choosing to shift your focus. It's funny, this whole conversation about negativity and mindset, it makes me think about what Shetty says about the ego. Your notes on that section were really interesting.
Yeah, it's one of those things, right? People always say, you got to kill your ego, but it's not that simple.
Exactly. And Shetty makes that distinction. There's the real ego, and then there's the false ego.
The real ego, that's just our sense of self,
Yeah.
our identity. And that's not a bad thing.
It's like the foundation.
Exactly. It's the false ego that gets us into trouble. The part that's insecure and inflated and always needs to be right.
You even highlighted that story about the monks, the ones who take a vow of silence.
Oh, that's a classic. They start off so disciplined, but then one by one they crack.
And then the judgment starts. It's the perfect example of how that false ego traps us in this cycle of being right, of needing to be better than everyone else.
Yeah, we've all been there.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, and that quote you circled from the Bhagavad Gita, so good. They are forever free who renounce all selfish desires and break away from the ego cage of I, me, and mine. It's like that need for validation from outside ourselves, that's the real cage.
Letting go of that need, that's where true freedom lies.
And here's the thing. It's not about becoming passive. Like, we're not trying to become indifferent to the world. It's more about recognizing that our worth isn't tied to all those external things.
Our achievements, our possessions, what other people think, it's about finding that security from within.
Exactly. Like Shetty says, we have to shift our mindset from prove yourself to be yourself. And speaking of being your best self, you practically dog-eared the page on the reflected best self exercise.
Oh, that's a good one, isn't it?
Yeah,
I love the idea of asking people you trust to describe a moment when they saw you at your best. It's amazing what we learn about ourselves when we see ourselves through someone else's eyes.
it's true. It's like watching your own highlight reel. And what I really like is how it focuses on specifics, on moments of excellence, not just vague personality traits. You start to see those patterns, those times when you were truly in the zone, when your actions and your values were totally aligned.
You start to get this picture of your own potential. And speaking of potential, it's been so great to see how you've highlighted all these practical applications in your notes. You're not just reading this stuff, you're thinking about how to actually use it.
Absolutely. And that's what's so great about Shetty's approach. He doesn't just leave us with these big ideas. He gives us the tools, the actual techniques to take those ideas and make them work in our everyday lives. Like, remember all those morning routines you flagged? You practically circled that whole section.
Oh yeah, that's a game changer for a lot of people.
Mhm.
We're so used to rushing through our mornings, fueled by caffeine and stress. But imagine if we actually took the time to slow down, to create a little space for ourselves.
That TIME framework. Thankfulness, insight, meditation, exercise. It's like a recipe for a mindful morning. And the great thing is, he's not saying do this, do that. He knows everyone's different.
Right. He just gives you a starting point and says, okay, now go experiment. Find what works for you.
Because ultimately, it all comes back to that core idea of monk wisdom. It's about mastering your mind. It's not about running away from the world. It's about showing up fully, presently, intentionally.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive. But before we go, I wanted to leave you with one last thought from Shetty. You didn't highlight this one, but it feels like the perfect way to tie everything together. He says, you don't have to be grateful for everyone in your life, but if you ask a monk what he has been given, the answer is everything.
Wow.
It's a whole different perspective, isn't it? It's like, even when things are tough, even when life is messy, there's still so much to appreciate.
It's that monk-like gratitude, not just for the good stuff, but for everything. The challenges, the lessons, even the obstacles.
Exactly. So there you have it. Go out there, embrace the messiness, and don't forget to try out those monk-minded practices. You never know, you might just unlock a level of peace and purpose and joy you never even imagined.